Hi everyone, welcome to another Hatton's Model Railways live stream, and today we're giving you a bit of a beginner's guide into starting looking at modelling carriage sidings on your 00 scale model railway. It's often a thing that's quite overlooked. Maybe you wanted a station, maybe you're thinking of having a goods shed, but carriage sidings are just as important a part of the UK's railway network and of course overseas too. You can have them in various different forms, and they have been adapted over the years to take different types of trains too, with some of the original buildings still in use after almost 150 years of operation. So we'll be covering some of the different aspects of carriage sheds, some of the different items that we have available right now to recreate these scenes on your layout, and some of my top tips into some of the little details that you'll need to have them on your railways the best way you can. Usually we are talking about a huge sprawling set of sidings, as we see here at Red Bank Sidings in Manchester. This particular setup, built by the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, was then taken over eventually by British Rail and ran into the 1990s. We've got a fairly typical setup here though. The carriage sidings were often either seen quite empty or quite full here, as you can see, with trains coming in and out of the commuter periods, so you'd have them quite empty when every single piece of rolling stock was in use, and then quite full, especially heading into the late evening when a lot of those trains were coming back to be serviced. And a lot of the minor servicing was carried out at facilities and still is carried out at facilities like this, with cleaning, removing the waste from the toilets, and other minor mechanical work too carried out on the carriages within these sidings and sheds. As you can see surrounding me here, we do have some carriage sheds available, and in some cases these areas were covered to protect the condition of the rolling stock inside them. You'll see here another of Manchester's carriage depots. This is Longsight Carriage Depot, with two BR Blue locomotives hauling various rakes of coaches into and out of these sheds. So these would be a more in-depth facility. You can see here there's 13 different roads on this carriage shed, so you can get the idea of how big an area this covered. And you can see some of the facilities there as well, used by the staff, including the pipes to fill the tanks with water for the toilets, and of course the catering facilities on some of the carriages there too. It's something that's been around since the late 1830s, although initially these were carriage is more in common with road carriages, where the vehicles will be stored singly alongside the line rather than in full complete rakes of coaches here. This quite quickly changed, and by the end of the 19th century, carriages were being stored in set or semi-set rakes in carriage sidings, or in some busier locations in towns and cities, the sheds that we've seen on some of the photos so far. One of the most important things to bear in mind with your carriage shed or with your carriage sidings, as you can see here, this is the 00 ratio kit for a Great Western Railway style carriage shed. And one of the most important things to bear in mind is the access platform that we have there on our left. Not quite as thin, more thin, shall we say, than a usual carriage platform, this particular example. But at the same time, this was only for intentional use by staff. So this would just be people who were accessing the coaches, mainly to clean the windows and mainly to clean the insides of the coaches there too. This would not be a public platform that was accessible by normal passengers. We also have the corrugated iron roof, ends and sides, which would protect the coaches when they were not in use. If you leave them outside for quite some time, it does add to the maintenance costs, especially in the wet weather that we have in the UK, certainly at the moment anyway. So these carriage sidings, mainly big expenses on the edges of towns and cities, although you did get a couple of smaller examples out there too. Really did depend on how many vehicles were expected to be stored there and how long they would be there too. There were some huge carriage sidings with vehicles that very rarely moved, maybe for use on summer excursion traffic only, and spent the winter waiting for the next summer to come, in which case you'd need quite a bit of space for those vehicles to live for a long time. Whereas on some sidings, such as those here we have at Cambridge, this is some modern carriage sidings now used for the stabling of multiple units, as we can see here. These are emptied and refilled every single day, with the majority, if not all of the units, heading out into traffic on the suburban railways out of London and in East Anglia, leaving the carriage sidings empty there. So whilst this platform is different, it still calls back to the original carriage sidings from 100 years before. You've still got your access platforms there heading up to the different trains to allow cleaners and maintenance staff, and indeed the driving crews, to access these units very easily indeed. Of course, on the more modern scene that we've got here, we have a few more safety measures in place, including warning signs, and of course some of the safety railings on some of the platforms that we can see there. But the main basic principle is the same. It's still long, straight, or mainly straight sidings where we can store our rolling stock when it's not in use. The locomotives will very rarely be stored in the same place as the vehicles, having their own engine shed. But with the advent of multiple units coming onto our railways from the early 20th century onwards, these facilities were then either rebuilt or made new into designs for sheds that we see. I'll give you a couple of examples of those now, actually. These are some in the London suburbs of sheds originally used for locomotive-hauled coaching stock, which have been repurposed for modern multiple units, as we see here. So you've still got the original building there. And this, as we mentioned towards the start of the stream, is a great opportunity if you fancy a classic looking building, such as our Great Western Carriage shed here, or indeed some of the traditional style platforms, which are also available as kits that I'll be showing you shortly. They are available and can be adapted into your 21st century model railway. So just to show you one more example to show you, they don't always need platforms either. This is a seaside carriage sidings at Paignton down in the southwest of England. This was intended for no maintenance to the vehicles at all. The trains would arrive here at the Seaside Holiday Resort from destinations, well, from departure points, shall I say, all across the UK, where they would purely be serviced and then returned to their destinations at the end of the day. So there would be no long-term stabling of units or carriages here. And you can see just behind our Class 159 DMU, some of the more basic facilities here to enable that to happen. The pumps between the tracks would supply water to the tanks on the vehicles to replace the water in the toilets and also the water in the catering vehicles. But otherwise, we don't have much else there. We don't have any carriage platforms for the cleaners, and we certainly don't have a carriage shed facility there too. So this was based really for short-term workings that were coming onto the region and leaving again either over the weekend or on the same day. So you usually find that the sidings are for stabling rolling stock that's expected to head out over quite a bit of time. Some of the larger facilities, such as the sheds that we mentioned there previously, are to keep the stock in. Whilst it will go out most days, a lot more maintenance is expected to happen in some of these carriage sheds too, with the facilities there to keep these vehicles in tip-top condition. So as you've seen from the pictures, there's quite a few different ways to replicate these on your layout. Whether you do want to pick up one of the carriage shed kits that you see here, or you can adapt locomotive shed kits into some more of the modern examples that you see out there. Whether you want to pick up one of the plastic kits, such as the ratio kit that we have here, or some of the resin-built buildings, there is indeed a Scenecraft 4-road carriage shed there too. Here, I've just got some carriage sidings in front of me with a variety of different coaches. I would then be looking at putting the platforms in between these. So you can either pick up the really thin ratio platforms designed more on the Great Western system that we see here, or over to my right, we have the Gauge Master platforms, which are really easy to fit together plastic kit. You'll see here that everything you need is contained on just one sprue, and just a little bit of plastic glue on this kit then gets that platform together and gives you just over a foot of platform for your railway. So that would then go between your tracks, as we've seen here on some of the examples. However, do bear in mind that, as we've seen on the pictures, some of the sidings don't have a carriage height platform. Here we can see, whilst we do have platforms, these are at ground level, just raised slightly above the ground. And I would recommend having a look at your specific example that you see out there, just to make sure it's looking as accurate as possible. But there's a huge variety in these different items out there. One thing I want to point out on this particular picture too, you will see the yard lamps coming along the side of the platforms in this photo. These are replicated by several different models that we can offer right now from a variety of different suppliers, including TrainTech and TrainSave. These changed very much through the eras at the time. So there is something to look at there too if you do want to pick up one of those. But it is something that's often forgotten, the carriage side, and it's something that you don't see modelled too often. But operationally, it is one of the most interesting sides of the railway, whether you're modelling them in the classic era with steam locomotives or some of the early diesel designs coming to pick up their traditional locomotive hauled stock, as we see here, following maintenance and taking it out onto the rails with a huge shed here at Manchester's Longside Depot. You've also got the opportunities then to recreate one in a more modern scene, still serving the same purpose, but this time with electric multiple units, as we see here, with the carriage servicing platforms still in place to allow minor maintenance and cleaning of these units before they go in and out of traffic. To give you one last idea of inspiration, maybe not quite a nice scene to see, but some of these facilities, with the withdrawal of coaching stock in the 1980s and 1990s, have been left in disrepair. Whilst we can see some of the traditional facilities on offer here, including the brick-built building and a wooden roof and some of the interior lighting, we can see that this really is in a state of disrepair. But maybe something to include on a quiet corner of your layout. Maybe if you want to build a diorama of a derelict scene, starting with a plastic kit such as this or the carriage platforms here is a fantastic way to do that and maybe recreate something that we see, unfortunately, all too often in real life these days out there. So have a quick look at what we've got available on our website. We do have other carriage shed kits for different railways available, and every now and then we do have some of the Scenecraft resin buildings come through too. If you've got a bit of modelling imagination, you can adapt some of the modern structures, especially the locomotive sheds, into carriage sheds too. But as we've shown here today, you don't always need a lot of buildings or even a lot of track in some cases to recreate one of these scenes on your layout too. So do take a bit of a look at what we've got available there right now. And again, just showing you some different photos of inspiration. As one of you has keenly spotted there, that indeed is Birkenhead shed there, which has now been withdrawn from service, as you can see here in derelict condition. So whilst there is a huge amount of history to cover here, these facilities have been in service since the 1840s, and nearly 200 years later, they're still an important part of the UK's railway network, where servicing trains can be made really simply and easily. You've got trains running into them and departing them all throughout the day, and especially if you use steam era modelers and early diesel modelers too, you've got a huge amount of shunting in these facilities where the different rakes would have been formed before the trains head out into service. So I hope you've taken a little bit of inspiration from today's video. Maybe you're now thinking about adding a carriage siding to your layout, and we have all the pieces, including the plastic kits and some of the accessories available right now from our website. If you'd like to check out more, there is a link there in the description. And I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you're looking for more inspiration for your model railway, or indeed the next theme on your layout, check out our YouTube channel. Make sure to like our Facebook page. We have inspirational videos on adding engine sheds, good sheds, country stations, and we are looking at producing more of these in the future. So if there's anything you'd like to see us give a bit of an overview guide to like this, please let us know in the chat or indeed the comments of the video, and we'll certainly give it some consideration for a video in 2021. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you have, and we will see you next time. Take care.